welcome back to Star Wars Lads. I used to do these videos every single time a new show would come out. I would talk about the characters I think could possibly be in the next Star Wars show. I haven't done this since Obi-Wan Kenobi last year, but I wanted to bring it back for Ahsoka because there are a lot of characters that could definitely appear in this show. So here for you today are over 100 characters that could be in the Ahsoka series on Disney+. Before we get started, make sure you're hitting that like button and you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you get notified as soon as videos come out. We're gonna have full Ahsoka coverage here on Star Wars Lads, so make sure you are tuning in every single week. We'll of course have our reviews as well as our predictions and speculation. And if you haven't checked out some of the other Ahsoka coverage that has already been up on the channel, make sure you do so. All right, let's get into the video. So I've got over 100 characters for you all here, and in order to make this video not extremely long, I'm going to be doing this in a kind of a tier list format to group these characters. I also want to mention I'm not going to be including any characters on this list that have already been confirmed for the show. So obviously Sabine, Hera, Ezra, Thrawn, those types of characters will not be on this list. As well as Anakin Skywalker, I'm not going to be including him. We're going to break down different groups of Star Wars characters that could possibly be in this show. We're going to start with Rebels characters. So let's kick it off with a character that I definitely think will be in the show, and that is Zeb Orrelios. We just saw Zeb in The Mandalorian Season 3, obviously creating our first ever CGI Lasat. I don't think they would just make this for a cameo in The Mandalorian. It's hard to talk about Zeb without talking about Alexander Kallus, the former Imperial agent turned rebel hero. Kallus also seems primed for a live-action debut in Ahsoka. Next is Jacen Syndulla. There have already been a lot of rumors about Jacen Syndulla being in the show. Will he be a big character? Maybe not, but I think he'll definitely be in it. So next, let's talk about some of the relatives of characters we definitely know are going to be in Ahsoka. First off, let's talk about Clan Wren. Sabine Wren seems to be the co-lead, or kind of the second most important character in the Ahsoka show. In Star Wars Rebels, Sabine's family is led by her mother, Ursa Wren. Sabine's father is also in Star Wars Rebels named Ulrich Wren, and her brother Tristan Wren makes an appearance as well. None of these characters have perished, and we don't know what happens to them during the Night of a Thousand Tears. It only makes sense with the New Republic era really fleshing out the Mandalorians that we could see Clan Wren make an appearance here. Let's also talk about Cham Syndulla, the father of Hera Syndulla. Cham Syndulla is a rebel leader from Ryloth. He led the Twi'lek resistance during the Clone Wars against the Separatists, and also led a Twi'lek resistance against the Empire in the Dark Times. Cham Syndulla would be pretty old at this time, but he is not dead yet, so he could very well show up in the show. Being one of the leads of the Clone Wars, Ahsoka has a very close connection with many clones. We see that in Rebels with the clones Rex, Wolf, and Gregor. Although Gregor perished at the Battle of Lothal, Wolf and Rex are still alive. It has been very heavily rumored that Tamara Morrison will be taking on the role of Rex in the show, but Wolf could also show up in a supporting role. Next, let's talk about some Inquisitors. So in the trailers, we do see Ahsoka fighting a couple different Inquisitors, so we do know that the Inquisitorius still will be playing a role post Return of the Jedi in Star Wars. A lot of people have speculated that the 8th brother, the Inquisitor whose spinning lightsaber was damaged at the end of Season 2 of Star Wars Rebels, will be one of the Inquisitors that Ahsoka is fighting in the trailer we've seen. There are also a lot of rumors about flashbacks in the show, and with the live-action casting of the Grand Inquisitor and 5th brother for Obi-Wan Kenobi, if there were flashbacks in the show, we could see an appearance from both of those characters. And if we are going to be seeing an appearance from both of those characters, you can't rule out the 7th sister. The 7th sister is voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar, who could definitely play this character in live action. And we also might want to mention her husband, Freddie Prinze Jr. Freddie Prinze Jr. voiced the character of Kanan Jarrus in Star Wars Rebels. Although Kanan did die in Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, we could definitely see him in a flashback. Freddie Prinze Jr. has been on record about saying that he doesn't owe Lucasfilm any more favors about playing the character of Kanan Jarrus. To me, it sounds a lot like how Liam Neeson said he didn't want to do TV when asked about playing Qui-Gon Jinn in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I see this as an attempt by Freddie Prinze Jr. to just deflect the question about playing Kanan in live action. And then finally, from Star Wars Rebels, let's talk about the Bendu. Bendu was a Force-sensitive entity who resided on the planet Atollon in Season 3 of Star Wars Rebels. He claimed to represent the center of the Force, both light and dark. The Rebels characters learn a lot from Bendu, and since Ahsoka is also a Jedi who kind of walks that line between the light and dark, we could see her maybe turn to Bendu for some information. Using the tier list to kind of organize the thoughts I've just put out there for you all, these are the categories I see all of the Rebels characters I just mentioned. I think Rex, Zeb, Jason, and Kallus should definitely be in the Ahsoka series. Clan Ren, as well as Cham Syndulla and Bendu, are strong possibilities. The 8th brother, Wolf, the Grand Inquisitor, and the 5th brother are maybes. And then I would round out with the 7th sister as a probably not. Next, let's get into the Clone Wars cast of characters. Let's start with the titular clones. So even though I talked about Rex for the Rebels cast, because I do think we'll see kind of present day Rex in the Ahsoka timeline, I do also think we could see Temuera Morrison as Clone Wars Rex. I'll be referencing one of the latest TV spots from the Ahsoka series a lot in this video, because in that spot we did get a line of dialogue from Hayden Christensen that we have never heard before, where it sounds like he's talking to Ahsoka about the Clone Wars, teaching her a lesson about fighting not just droids but other challenges that come in her way. So it seems like we're almost for sure getting Clone Wars flashbacks in this show, and if we do, we might as well see Rex if we're going to see Anakin. Another clone of the 501st that we definitely could see is Fives. Ahsoka has a relationship with Fives, even if it's not a big one. Fives is one of the most important characters for the arc of the Clone Wars though, so I could see just a bone being thrown and we could see Fives, maybe not without his helmet, but with his helmet and armor on as an ARC trooper. Another important clone that Temuera Morrison has already played in live action is Commander Cody. We don't know what happens to Commander Cody after his appearance in the Bad Batch. He did defect from the Empire, and he could be a part of maybe Rex's crew if we get to see more clones that have lived past Return of the Jedi. Crossing over to Tales of the Jedi, Ahsoka's origin was told in the first episode of that series. That episode introduced both of her parents, Pavti Tano and Nakil Tano. If we decide to flash back all the way to young baby Ahsoka, we could see both of her parents then. Switching gears and going back to the early days of Ahsoka, she was found by Jedi Master Plo Koon. Plo Koon is one of the favorite Jedi of series creator Dave Filoni. Maybe this is Dave Filoni's chance to finally give some character to live action Plo Koon. Talking about some more Jedi characters from the Clone Wars, let's talk about Barriss Offee. On some of our live streams and across the conversation on the internet, a lot of people have been asking if Barriss could show up in the show as one of the main villains. While I personally think that would be a better season 2 plot, considering Thrawn will most likely dominate the villain conversation in this show, I would like to see the dynamic between Ahsoka and Barriss played out eventually. Another Jedi that Ahsoka does have a connection to, appearing as one of his mentors in season 5, is the Jedi youngling Gungi. If we get maybe a moment at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy, if this show has flashed forward a bit in time since the Book of Boba Fett, maybe Gungi is one of the Padawans training there. Another Jedi that would probably not be a huge possibility considering Ahsoka doesn't really have a relationship with him at all, but we do know he survived Order 66, is Quinlan Vos. If we do see Jedi in the present timeline of the Ahsoka show, Quinlan Vos does have a chance of showing up. Let's move on to some other Force-related characters that are related to Ahsoka. Morai, the owl-looking creature known in Star Wars as a Confor, with spiritual ties to the daughter of Mortis, has been seen in The Mandalorian Chapter 13, The Jedi. Morai often appears around Ahsoka since the daughter transferred her life essence into Ahsoka prior to her death. Let's also talk about the Mortis gods. Although all three of them are technically dead, the secrets of the Force and their powers, as well as the mysteries of Mortis, could definitely play a role in Ahsoka. Maul could possibly appear in a flashback to either when Ahsoka fights him on Mandalore, or when he encounters the rebels at the end of Season 2. Another character who has made the transition from animation to live action is Cad Bane. Although we're not really sure if he survived the end of Book of Boba Fett, he could be an iconic enough villain to show Ahsoka, Anakin, and Obi-Wan maybe chasing at some point in a flashback to the Clone Wars. Another character who has recently appeared in live action, although it's been for Disney parks, is Hondo Ohnaka. Ahsoka has crossed paths with Hondo many times as both tenuous friend and foe, but if we do get into the underworld side of the Thrawn Trilogy in the Ahsoka series, Hondo is a sure bet to be a part of that in some way. Another set of underworld characters that play an important role in the story of Ahsoka in the Clone Wars are the Martez sisters. Martez sisters made a second appearance in the Bad Batch, and with their connection to Ahsoka, it's a possibility they could show up in the show. The last Clone Wars character I want to talk about is Lux Bonteri. Lux Bonteri has a semi-flirtatious relationship with Ahsoka throughout the Clone Wars. He plays a significant role in Ahsoka's life, helping her see the other sides of the war prior to her leaving the Jedi Order. He'd be a good character to show up in some type of political role in this show. Let's get to a few characters from the Bad Batch, namely the titular squad themselves. Although it appears that Tech has died and we're not sure the fate of Crosshair, I could definitely see a lot of the Bad Batch members making it to the time of Ahsoka. Speaking of adult Omega, the end of the Bad Batch Season 2 revealed that the scientist Amiri Carr is also an adult female clone of Jango Fett. I would assume most of her story will play out in the Bad Batch Season 3, but if we go to the planet Wayland and Mount Tantus and experiment with some of the cloning stuff in this show that's present in the Thrawn Trilogy, we could see Amiri Carr or Omega in this show as well. If we're talking about cloning on Tantus, we can also talk about Dr. Royce Hemlock, a maniacal villain who appeared towards the end of Season 2. We also could mention the Kaminoans. We're not sure how many of them are still alive, or if any, at the time of Ahsoka, but it would be really cool to see another one of them in live action. So here again, I've listed all the Clone Wars, Tales of the Jedi, and Bad Batch characters I just talked about. I do think Morai is as close of a lock of a character that we haven't seen in the trailers yet. I also put Captain Rex, the Clone Wars version of him, up in the top tier. The Mortis Gods I put at the top of strong possibility because I do think they'll appear in some form of artwork at some point. Plo Koon I put in strong possibility just because Dave Filoni is running this show. I also put Lux in strong possibility. At the top of maybe I put Barriss Offee. Hondo could also make an appearance just because he is so fun and beloved. I do think cloning is going to be a part of the show, so the Kaminoans being in it could very well be the case. Cody I think is probably the second most logical clone to show up in this show. Tying in the Bad Batch as well and trying to connect that viewership might also make sense. Ahsoka's parents could make sense in a flashback, but not towards the top of the maybe tier. Gungi as well could be a character that would be interesting to see. Fives might make a background appearance. Amiri Carr and Royce Hemlock I put lower in the maybe tier because I think it's possible with the cloning aspect, but I feel like their story is going to play out in the Bad Batch instead. Quinlan Vos, Cad Bane, Darth Maul, and the Martez sisters would all be a very big surprise. I do think Quinlan has the best odds out of all of them because he could still be alive in the present day storyline. Let's move on to some of the main characters from Star Wars films, namely the Skywalker Saga. Let's first talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi, who of course had a strong relationship with Ahsoka Tano considering he was the master of Anakin Skywalker, who was the master of Ahsoka. Obi-Wan could appear in the show in two forms. I think the most likely is a flashback. When we get our Clone Wars flashback of the show, I definitely think we could see Ewan McGregor a part of that flashback in some way. Obi-Wan could also appear as a Force ghost. From what we've heard, Hayden Christensen most likely is going to be appearing in both flashback form as Anakin, as well as Anakin's Force ghost post Return of the Jedi. If we do see Anakin's Force ghost, we could also see Obi-Wan's. Speaking of Force ghosts, we could also see Jedi Master Yoda. And then the final Force ghost we could talk about is Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn really has no relationship with Ahsoka, so the likelihood of seeing him here would be pretty slim. Speaking of prequel characters, we could see Padme Amidala. With Natalie Portman returning to Marvel, there have been rumors about her returning to Star Wars as well. This of course would have to be a flashback. Moving on to the original trilogy characters, starting with Padme's children, Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa. Luke Skywalker has already directly met Ahsoka, and we know the deepfake technology and AI voice they're using for Luke has been pretty strong. If we want to see any more live action appearances of Leia, most likely it will be in deepfake as well, and it makes a lot of sense if there are a lot of New Republic meetings or politics in this show. Next, let's talk about Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Lando Calrissian. None of these characters really have a relationship with Ahsoka Tano, although Chewbacca did meet her one time. C-3PO and especially R2-D2 did work with Ahsoka quite a few times. We did see R2-D2 with Ahsoka in the Book of Boba Fett. Let's bring up Ben Solo next. A lot of people have been asking us if we think Ben Solo could appear in the show. He could definitely appear in the show, however, he would only be about 4 years old, maybe 5 if Ahsoka jumps a year in the Mandalorian timeline. Wedge Antilles could be another character we see if we deal with New Republic politics and military. Another character a lot of fans have been clamoring for to return is Mace Windu. I do not think this is the show for Mace Windu to return, even if he was somehow alive. A character that is very tricky to predict is Emperor Palpatine. The spirit of Palpatine does reside on Exegol during this time, but seeing him would all depend on whether Thrawn is directly working with Palpatine and the Sith Eternal Fleet. Another interesting character to talk about would be Supreme Leader Snoke. We saw what looked like early Snoke prototypes in an Imperial lab on Navarro. Those Snoke prototypes haven't really come back into play. Let's talk about some New Republic characters. With the appearance of Mon Mothma in the trailers, we definitely know we're getting some New Republic characters in this show. Admiral Akbar would be a prime candidate to return. Some other military personnel who could make appearances could be General Riken, as well as General Crix Madine. Amilyn Holdo has been a part of a lot of the comics recently. Laura Dern could definitely make an appearance in this show as well in a political fashion. Ahsoka also worked directly with Bail Organa during her time as Fulcrum. We could see Bail Organa in a flashback, and we know that Jimmy Smits has come back a lot to play that role. So when we look back at the list, I put Obi-Wan Kenobi in the should be an Ahsoka tier. Luke Skywalker is at the top of strong possibility, considering we've already seen him interact with Ahsoka. I did put Palpatine and Snoke in strong possibility because I do think that's going to play a large part in Thrawn's plan. Yoda is always a strong possibility when it comes to Jedi stuff, so I think he should be up there. I do think it's about time to perfect that Leia deepfake, and I do think she is a strong possibility, as well as Admiral Akbar. And if Luke and Leia are strong possibilities, I would definitely put C-3PO and R2-D2 in the strong possibility tier. In the maybes, I would slide a lot of the New Republic personnel, Amilyn Holdo, General Crix Madine, and General Riken in the middle of that tier, as well as Bail Organa and Padme Amidala in a flashback, and I would see there's a decent chance of seeing a very young Ben Solo. Since Chewbacca has actually met Ahsoka, and it's a lot easier to have Chewbacca in the show rather than casting or deepfaking, I did put him in maybe, but in probably not, I had to slide Qui-Gon Jinn considering he has basically no relationship to Ahsoka, as well as Wedge Antilles because it doesn't really make sense to do any recasting or deepfaking just for that character. And then our first entries in Don't Bet On It are Han, Lando, and Mace Windu. Let's now move on to the New Republic era shows, and we're talking about The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. Since the Ahsoka series takes place in that timeline, there is a strong bet that a lot of these characters could cross over. I think the strongest possibility here would be Bo-Katan Kryze. Bo-Katan has taken over as the Mandalore at the end of Mandalorian Season 3. She also, out of all these characters, has the strongest relationship with Ahsoka, so it would make a lot of sense if she showed back up. Din Djarin seems to be in everything and hijacking everyone's show, so I definitely could see him showing up, as well as Grogu, because Ahsoka was the person to reveal that was his name to all of us. Boba Fett has a bit of a relationship with Ahsoka. They've met a few times in the Clone Wars, but not much. Fennec Shand could also show up if Boba shows up. We're not sure if Moff Gideon is still alive or not, but if he is, there is a possibility he shows up here, considering he is partially working for Thrawn. Working as a spy for Moff Gideon was Elia Kane. If she appears, we could see Dr. Pen Pershing. We could also see him if the cloning plot is big in the Ahsoka show. And then a couple members of the Shadow Council that I think we will probably see are for sure Gilad Pellaeon, Thrawn's second in command in the original Thrawn trilogy, as well as Brendel Hux, who was in charge of the early stages of the First Order. So slotting these characters into the tier list, I do think Gilad Pellaeon is as sure of a lock as we can get. Next, I think Bo-Katan Kryze is towards the top of strong possibility, considering her connection with Ahsoka. I think Din Djarin and Grogu are always very strong possibilities. I threw Brendel Hux up there as well. I threw Moff Gideon, Elia Kane, and Dr. Pen Pershing all in strong possibility. I really don't think Moff Gideon is dead. Into the maybe tier, I put Boba Fett as well as Fennec Shand. Okay, let's move on to Thrawn Trilogy characters here. Let's start with the obvious one, the one I've made a lot of videos about, the one we talk about all the time, Mara Jade. Mara Jade is a character I definitely think is coming back into canon at some point. However, I personally don't think this is it. Speaking of New Republic characters, we could also finally introduce Wars Skywalker to canon. He's one of the chief political antagonists in the Thrawn Trilogy. Talon Karrde is the leader of the Underworld and plays a massive role in the Thrawn Trilogy. It doesn't appear we're doing Underworld stuff in the show, but if we do, he could definitely show up. Some other major characters that are part of the Smugglers Alliance and do play big roles in the Thrawn Trilogy in the Underworld are Niles Ferrier and Mazik. We could also see the Katana Fleet make an appearance in this show. I put Rook here because he's our canon depiction of a Nogri, but obviously the Nogri play a huge role in the Thrawn Trilogy. Rook is dead, so most likely it won't be him, but we could see somebody like Kabarak of Clan Kimbar. And then of course there's Garm Bel Iblis, one of the main New Republic military characters in the Thrawn Trilogy. Jaruus Sabayoth is a character also up for debate, and the last couple Thrawn Trilogy characters we could talk about here are Luke Skywalker, the clone of Luke Skywalker, and Leia's lifelong friend, Winter. So when we look here at the tiers, I'm very mixed on a lot of where these Thrawn Trilogy characters could fall. I do think Borsk Phalia and Jaruus Sabayoth have the best chance of appearing in this show. Towards the top of maybe, I did put the Katana Fleet and the Nogri. Since the Nogri allegiance to anybody besides Thrawn has not been confirmed yet in canon. I do think we could see a couple of Noghri as Thrawn bodyguards. I've always had the theory that the Katana fleet could be operated by clones of Jango Fett. If we do get into that plot point, or I've been right about that, we could definitely see the Katana fleet make an appearance in the show. I slid the character of Talon Karrde towards the bottom of maybe. Garm Bel Iblis gets a spot in the maybe tier because a lot of the other characters in canon have kind of pulled from his story already. I also put Winter towards the bottom. I do think it's a maybe though for Winter, but it would rely on a Leia appearance. In the probably not, I put Mara Jade. Trust me, I would love to see Mara Jade appear, even if it's just for a cameo, but I do think her story is better served if we use her in a medium that's going to maximize Luke Skywalker as well. Because Talon Karrde's a maybe, I put Niles Ferrier and Mazik and probably not. And then finally, and don't bet on it, I put Luke Skywalker, even though I do think cloning will be a part of the show. All right, let's get into Thrawn characters from canon. So there have been 6 Thrawn books in canon, and the Ascendancy trilogy especially has been very dense and packed with detail and interesting characters. One of the characters first introduced in the very first Timothy Zahn canon Thrawn book was Eli Vanto. Eli Vanto is a human character from the Outer Rim who gets along with Thrawn and becomes his translator and kind of mentee. Thrawn eventually takes Vanto to the Chiss to be kind of an Imperial ambassador. Thrawn's seemingly closest friend in the Chiss Ascendancy, and one of the only Chiss who seems to put up with Thrawn's antics, is Arizi Aralani, or Aralani for short. Aralani has become one of the fundamental Chiss characters in canon. There are a whole slew of Chiss characters that are involved with Thrawn during the Ascendancy trilogy. Character like the Skywalker Chiri could make an appearance. The Chiss Skywalkers in general would be really interesting to put into live action. One of the other main characters who takes care of Chiri, her caretaker, is Meath Aili Astoff, or Thalius. Some other Thrawn allies in the Ascendancy trilogy that could appear are Klar Osculry, or Rosku, the second officer of Admiral Dyloth on the Venturius, Supreme General Stybla Bakif, or Bakif for short, and Ufsa Macro, or Samacro for short. If we explore the Chiss Ascendancy, we also have to explore the Grisk hegemony. The Grisk hegemony is the government of the Grisks, the main threat to the Chiss in the Ascendancy trilogy. If Thrawn is still concerned with the oncoming threat of the Grisks, which is the main reason for his sham exile to join the Empire, the Grisks should play a major role in this series. So as you can see here, I have put Eli Vanto, Aralani, and all of Thrawn's Chiss allies in the should be in Ahsoka tier, mostly because that's my hopeful optimism that they will be. Let's look at some Legends or Expanded Universe characters who could make an appearance in Ahsoka. A lot of people have been begging for Starkiller, played by Sam Witwer in the video game, to make an appearance as one of the Inquisitors. There's also the possibility of the Yuuzhan Vong if Filoni decides to go with them as a bigger threat than maybe even the Grisks. We've talked about Pelion or Brendel Hux as Imperial warlords at this time, and Thrawn seems to be trying to unify all the Imperial warlords. Maybe we could either see Isan Izard, Warlord Zinj, or Natasi Dala. If we get into Izard, of course that brings up maybe Corran Horn making an appearance in a very small role, as well as his future wife, Mirax Tarek. So when we look at these other Legends characters who could possibly make an appearance, I did put all 3 warlords in the strong possibility tier. We'll see how much Dave Filoni wants to pull on Legends, but a name drop for Izard, Zinj, or Dala would be quite cool. I dropped Corran Horn and Mirax Tarek towards the bottom of probably not, and then in don't bet on it, I put Starkiller towards the top. Again, just personally, as somebody who's a fan of Starkiller, I don't really want to see him just die as an Inquisitor against Ahsoka early in the show. And the Yuuzhan Vong most likely won't be in this because it seems like they're being replaced by the Grisks anyways in Zahn's Thrawn mythology. And finally, let's get to some extended canon characters that could possibly be in this show. These would be characters from books or comics. Let's start with one everybody's been wanting to see, and that is Cal Kestis. While I do think Cal will live on into the post Return of the Jedi timeline, it seems like just another big character to put in this show. Some characters from Battlefront 2 that have always stood out, like Iden Versio and Shriv, could make appearances here. 2 characters that were quite important to Ahsoka in the Ahsoka novel by E.K. Johnston were Mayara and Kaden Larte. The parents of Poe Dameron could appear here, Shara Bey and Kes Dameron. Nora Wexley could make an appearance here, the mother of Snap Wexley from the sequels, and eventually the wife of Wedge Antilles. And then one of the most important Imperials that we seem to have ignored from the early days of Star Wars canon, Admiral Rey Sloane. So finally, when we look at these characters, I did put Admiral Rey Sloane in strong possibility. If we're going to be bringing back a bunch of warlords from the Empire, it really makes a lot of sense to bring her into the fold. Into the maybe tier, I dropped Kes Dameron and Shara Bey. If we wanted to connect this show to the sequels a bit with the New Republic side, I could see it. I would have put Mayara and Caden Larte a little higher considering their importance to Ahsoka's journey. However, with the retcons we've already seen Dave Filoni make to that novel, it seems like he doesn't hold the characters or the story in super high regard. I dropped Iden Versio and Shriv into probably not. It seems like the Battlefront 2 characters have been pretty much forgotten at this point. I also put Nora Wexley in probably not. If she appears, we should probably see Wedge, and since he's in probably not, I thought I might as well drop her in that tier as well. So thank you so much for watching this video. This was over 100 characters that could appear in the Ahsoka series. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your theories about some characters down below. Make sure you're liking this video if you haven't already. Help me get this video to 50 likes. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't for a ton of Ahsoka content coming here in the future and already on the channel. Again, make sure you stay tuned with the channel. We have the Ahsoka reviews coming next week as well as our predictions and speculation. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.